the housing crisis. It's something that we're doing on many fronts. So not just the catalog, but indeed we're building more apartments and co-ops by removing the GST on construction. We're eliminating barriers to get more homes built faster by working directly with cities. And we're helping Canadians save up for a home with the First Home Savings Account. I know there's more to do, and we're going to continue to work with all governments to take bold action to tackle housing affordability.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Didn't answer my question about the Carleton mushroom farms, which faces a $400,000 carbon tax bill when the Prime Minister is done quadrupling the tax. When we spoke about this on November the 29th, he said that he looks forward to hearing the sustainable practices that the farm has put in place. Well, I can tell him I helped the farm actually get natural gas to its in order to power some of its operations, which is a lower emitting form of energy. But they're still going to face a massive tax increase. How will the Prime Minister advise the farm to pay it? By raising prices on Canadians or shutting down production and bringing in more foreign food?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, for farms across this country that are shifting towards natural gas and lower emitting ways of heating and using their various machinery, that is something that we have put in place significant programs to help them with, and that is something we are going to continue to do because it's part of our plan to both fight climate change and build a net zero economy of the future. We have a plan, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative Party of Canada has no plan to fight climate change. Indeed, they think we should be backing off on all the things we're doing and instead of continuing to fight climate change and grow a strong economy.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, the Prime Minister is backing off the things he's doing. Ironically, he's the one that brought in a temporary pause because his caucus was revolting regarding home heating oil. But my question was about the Medeiros Carleton mushroom farm. He claims that he's got government programs to help farmers use more natural gas at the same time as he's quadrupling the tax on natural gas, which perhaps is the reason why Canada ranks 58th out of 64 when it comes to climate index performance. Mr. Speaker, he doesn't have a climate plan, he has a tax plan, so how will he advise the Medeiros farm to pay the $400,000 bill he's sending them?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we recognize that climate change is a reality. We recognize that we need to help families and businesses across this country reduce their emissions and continue to prosper and grow in a world where the cost of inaction on climate change is increasing exponentially. That is why we have put in place programs to support farms, programs to support Canadians, indeed, to get off home heating oil, for example, and transform into heat pumps. These are things that we are doing as part of our plan. The Conservatives have no plan.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Our plan is to bring home production back to Canadian farms, Mr. Speaker. His plan raises a carbon tax on a greenhouse in my riding, which meant that their produce is more expensive in the village of Manotick than a Mexican tomato is in the village of Manotick, sending a price signal for consumers to buy the tomato that had to be transported by truck and train, burning fossil fuels right across the continent. Why doesn't he axe the tax so that we can bring down the cost of farm production and bring home more clean, green Canadian produce?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the price on pollution is simple. Activities that cause pollution cost a bit more, but most Canadians get more money back than what they pay, with checks being sent to Canadians every few months. Big industry pays more than the regular Canadian because industry pollutes more, and as a result, they have an incentive to reduce their pollution. The ideologically driven MAGA Conservatives are calling for pollution to be free again, and for the government to take those regular checks to Canadians away from them.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Everything he just said is factually wrong. One, industry doesn't pay the carbon tax. They have a carbon tax carve-out. And as for him claiming that people get more back in rebates, the Carleton mushroom farms will pay $100,000 this year, rising to $400,000 over the carbon tax increase the Prime Minister proposes. And he's sending them tiny rebate checks to their household mailbox. Is he committing today that he's going to send a $400,000 rebate to this family farm?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are there to support families, but multi-million-dollar farms that are successful will be continued to encourage to look for ways to use their machinery and to heat their produce in ways that is lower emitting. That's what fighting climate change is all about. It's encouraging successful farms like the Medeiros family farm to continue to be successful, but to do so in ways that reduce their emissions. We know it cannot ever be free to pollute again, despite what the Conservative Party wants.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Ironically, it is free for Mexican producers to, almost free, they have a tiny, tiny little carbon tax, not even comparable to the $400,000 tax bill that this Prime Minister is proposing. So what is he's saying is that there should be a price signal for Canadians to buy more expensive, polluting foreign food, while we, with the 5th biggest supply of arable land on planet Earth, shut our farmers down. How does that make any sense?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
More than just anyone else in this country, farmers understand how important it is to protect the land for future generations, to pass on the bounty to their children and grandchildren of a great, important job that feeds the rest of us. That is why farmers are so focused on the future, and that is why we are there to support them with a plan and investments that helps them reduce their emissions while they continue to put food on all our tables. We have a plan for that. The Conservative Party refuses to even admit that there needs to be work done to reduce emissions. That is not the way to build a future. Not in Carleton, not anywhere.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister claims that, actually he stated correctly, that farmers are working hard to protect the environment, which is why it's so strange that he wants to punish them with a tax that on one farm alone costs $100,000, that will rise to $400,000 for the crime of using the only source of energy that is available to that farm. So I'll ask the same question I've asked him now about half a dozen times. When he finally gets around to talking to Carleton mushroom farms, how will he advise them to pay their forthcoming $400,000 carbon tax bill? By raising prices on Canadians or by cutting back and bringing in more dirty foreign food?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, 97% of farm fuel emissions are exempt from the price on pollution. The average farm across this country pays a little less than $1,000 on natural gas emissions through the price on pollution. So one can only imagine how much natural gas this successful mushroom farm must be using for their cost of the price on pollution to be that large. And we will happily work with them to switch towards a lower emitting approach to doing their business well and protecting future generations.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
For 8 years, this Prime Minister and NDP Liberal government are not worth the cost. He said that he was taking on all this debt so that Canadians wouldn't have to. Well, now we learn that Canadians are spending more on household debt interest than at any time in Canadian history, more than the American families were during the 2008 financial crisis that almost brought down the global economy. Will the Prime Minister reverse the inflationary high tax policies that have indebted Canadians and driven up their interest rates?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The audacity of this Conservative leader knows no bounds.
Right.
Just last week, he voted against a national school food program, and now he rises to talk about affordability.
That's right.
Let's be clear. This Conservative leader has no long-term vision for this country with or without glasses. It takes more than a couple of bags of McDonald's to feed Canadians. That's why we're going to continue to step up and be there with investments for Canadians while he talks about cuts and austerity and then goes and votes for cuts and austerity.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians can't even afford to feed themselves a couple of bags of McDonald's after 8 years of this Prime Minister taxing their food. Speaking of food, you know the only problem with his school food framework? It doesn't fund any food. Right. It funds politicians to talk with bureaucrats who talk with lobbyists about establishing a conversation towards consulting. It funds bureaucracy and not families. So speaking of one way he can make food more affordable for everyone, including our kids, will he pass Bill C-234, the common sense Conservative bill to take the tax off?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we've seen exactly why, whatever his justifications, they have chosen to vote against initiatives there to help Canadians. Whether it's dental support for hundreds of thousands of kids that we've already brought in, with more support for seniors, they chose to vote against months ago, Mr. Speaker. They're continuing to step up and vote against the programs that matter. And while they seem not to care about climate change and want to sit back and watch the world burn, they're actually going to watch Canadians' food sources burn as well.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, it is that Prime Minister that is burning a hole in the pockets of Canadians. We voted against his plan to quadruple the carbon tax, a tax on heat, gas, and groceries. Now, the Prime Minister, when I raised the cost of $100,000 for one farm in my riding, which will rise to $400,000, I said, will he call the family and find out and tell them how they're going to pay the tax? He said he would reach out to them. He would have a conversation about how they're going to pay a $400,000 carbon tax bill. Can he tell the House what he told that family about how they're going to come up with $400 grand in more taxes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We recognize, Mr. Speaker, that the price on pollution is a key part of actually making things more affordable for the long term for Canadians by pushing and encouraging innovation. Indeed, our departments reached out to that farm family, to that very successful large mushroom farm in the member opposite's riding, to talk about the programs we have that can move off of their dependence on fossil fuels. We know there's work to do. We know there are investments to make, but that, Mr. Speaker, is how we fight climate change and build a better future. We have a plan to fight climate change. They have no plan because they don't even recognize that climate change is real.
Hear, hear.
Then I have the Opposition Party here in Ottawa. The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
Last night at committee, the hand-picked Liberal chair of this Prime Minister's billion-dollar green slush fund was exposed as having used staff at the fund to round up $10 million for her project that had been deemed ineligible. And then she literally ran out of the committee, shutting off the cameras because she didn't want to answer any more questions. This NDP Liberal government failed to protect taxpayers from embezzlers and swindlers to the tune of $150 million. After 8 years, this Prime Minister isn't worth that cost. When will Canadians get back their missing millions?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Innovation has already accepted the resignation of the CEO and chair. When allegations are made and issues arise, it's both appropriate and necessary for there to be a review of the matter. Those investigations and reviews are currently underway, and we look forward to the results of those investigations.
The honourable member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, it's going to be more in-depth than the whitewash investigation that this Prime Minister and his minister put forward. They're under investigation by the Auditor General, 2 Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner investigations. Their board chair, his hand-picked chair, resigned in disgrace along with the CEO. The Prime Minister was handing out millions after his minister knew that his insiders had their hand in the cookie jar, taking $150 million taxpayer dollars. This Prime Minister isn't worth the cost after 8 years, and his NDP Liberal government couldn't be more out of touch. So who got rich and where did the missing millions go?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
In service of making cheap political points, the Conservative Party of Canada can't take yes for an answer. Independent officers of Parliament are investigating. A third-party review of the allegations is underway, and we're committed to ensuring organizations which receive federal funding adhere to the highest standards of governance. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to fighting climate change and drawing in investments from around the world, we have a plan, we have a focus on doing it in the right ways that's going to grow the economy and support Canadians. The Conservatives have no plan whatsoever. All they can do is try and play partisan political games.
That's right.
The honourable member from South Shore, St. Margaret's.
The Minister of Industry for 35 months as minister on this file. And the Prime Minister's handpicked chair of the Green Slush Fund admitted last night that she tried to get $2.2 million of taxpayer money funneled to the Visharian Centre Vanity Project from the fund she chairs. Then she got the employees of the Slush Fund to get another $10 million for the Visharian Vanity Project from Liberal ministers. She took the money and ran. Visharian claimed that was being an entrepreneur. We're calling it grifting. Why did the Prime Minister let his Green Slush Fund chair abuse the taxpayer for personal gain?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The Minister has already addressed this question, and investigations are underway. But the work we are doing on fighting climate change is already cutting pollution while building a strong and competitive economy. While we work to advance our ambitious climate action, the Conservative Party has no plan because fighting climate change simply doesn't matter to them. The Conservative leader is turning his back on future generations, on both environment and economy, by refusing to commit to Canada's targets like his mentor Stephen Harper did when he withdrew from the Kyoto Accords.